Good morning. We'll call the Wednesday, August 11th meeting of the Criminal Justice Committee and to order. Start with roll call.
Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. Long.
Present.
Mr. Lear.
Present.
Mr. Snipes. Ms. Peters.
Present.
Ms. Parker.
Present.
Mr. Fairfield.
Present.
Mr. Carrico.
Present.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Present.
Mr. Swanson.
Present.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Present.
Mr. Hunter.
Present.
Mr. Collins.
Present.
Mr. Kenneth Smith.
Present.
Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
Mr. Seroy. We have a quorum.
I have not received anything for public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. You should have received a copy of the minutes for June 9th, 2021 and July 14th, 2021. Take a motion to combine and approve. Mr. Eckhoff, second by Mr. Long. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries.
No, I haven't. I oppose the minutes.
That's what I said. Motion carries though.
There was a complete section of our minutes that were left out of the last meeting. There was an exchange between yourself and I that was completely left out of the last meeting. I think that should be noted.
So noted. Okay.
Is there nothing we can do to fix the minutes? The minutes are incorrect. According to our own video on our website that documented this meeting, an entire exchange between yourself and I was omitted.
Got a question, Mr. Rowe, or an answer for us?
Well, minutes are usually not transcripts. Sorry. Minutes of meetings are not usually transcripts, but if the board or the committee sees fit, they could go back and amend those minutes to reflect whatever portion is excluded. It's really a committee preference, but they're not intended to be transcripts of every word that's said, but usually every exchange would at least be summarized in the minutes.
Okay.
During that section, I asked two specific questions, which I just posed as a question to the group to consider. And that was summarized with, quote, "There were no questions or concerns from the committee." After I spoke, Mr. Hunter also spoke and voiced some of his concerns regarding shots in the Marycrest area, and that wasn't addressed at all either. It was all summed up as there were no questions or concerns from the committee, and I posed at least two questions and multiple concerns.
Would you like to make a motion to?
I would like to make a motion to amend the minutes.
Ms. Peters?
I'll second.
Okay, hang on with Mr. Hunter.
Mr. Chairman, question on the motion. You're gonna amend them, that's fine too, but you don't have the specificities which my colleague indicated. So I assume that the maker of the motion and the seconder are saying that at some point specific that information will be incorporated into the new set of minutes. Is that correct?
I pretty well have a transcript, including the minutes on the video is according to what was said and when it was said. I can give you all of that information right now, or we can refer to the video.
Okay. We have a motion and a second that they want the minutes amended. We're gonna do a roll call vote. Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kelly, when did you send out the minutes?
Yesterday.
Yesterday? So it was at the end of the day? Okay. All right, so in the future, we will work to get the minutes out earlier. The board is encouraged, in this case, if there is an issue, to let us know before the meeting and we can address that beforehand. So I understand where Mr. Collins is coming from. We'll effort to get them out earlier in the day, if at the latest in the morning, so people have a chance to look at them before they come into the meeting. It's also noted that the official record of the county board is the video.
Video, correct.
So it all is up there pretty much forever, as long as YouTube is on the air. So I just want to mention that anybody can see exactly the exchange, but the official record is the video.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We're gonna do a roll call so we know.
Mr. Hess.
No.
Mr. Long.
No.
Mr. Lear.
Yes.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Ms. Peters.
Aye.
Ms. Parker.
No.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Nay.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
No.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, they will be reflected then. Moving on to the Chief Judge, no one's here. Up next be Circuit Clerk, Ms. Cianci. In your package, you have a copy of the Circuit Clerk's report. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Swanson, second by Ms. Peters. Morning, Sandy.
Good morning.
Comments on your report, please.
I'm gonna say there's nothing unusual about the end of month. It's a little lower and it's all reflected in every report actually. Normally we hit around the 300-something thousand range for the dispersed total, and this month it was for July, it was only 273,000. So then when you look at the other two collection reports from the state's attorney courtroom collection, court call collection, and the Illinois Local Debt Recovery Program, you can see that they've been dramatically reduced as well for the months of July. I do know that there were some changes with the threshold for the Illinois Local Debt Recovery Program. A threshold had to be met for people with their income and some other different things, and the governor put a moratorium on something, so we had to turn back. When we collect the Illinois Local Debt Recovery Program money, we collect it, and there's a 60-day window before, I mean, we don't collect it, it's collected at the state level, and then there's a 60-day window, and then that's when we get paid if there's nothing that changes. And so, and there's various reasons why things could be changed, like it could be the wrong person or something like that. But so we had to release several hundred cases back to the state because of that, so, or back to the individual. So that's probably why those things are low. But if anybody has any questions about my collection report.
Questions on the report? Mr. Hunter.
Andy, a question, you know, I've posed this question before. I'm not sure if what your response has been regarding what's your absenteeism for any given day or an average on a monthly basis. I asked that because of I had posed to you the suggestion of cross-training.
Correct. So we've had a few people out on extended leave for various reasons. A couple of them have finally started filtering back in. The main office was short by at least 3 people for a good portion of the summer. We had at least one in the traffic division that was out. We have another one going out in November. So we've had, you know, quite a bit there. The main office is pretty much cross-trained. The traffic department is pretty much cross-trained. They help each other out as best they can. The minute clerks are in court, and then the floaters are the ones that travel from courtroom to courtroom. So that's what we have.
And what's your workforce overall?
36 people.
And on a daily basis, on an average, let's say, how many people are not there?
We can be missing 5 or 6 a day at various times. Sometimes it could be just for an hour for a doctor's appointment, something like that, or it could be, you know, like a lot of them try to schedule their appointments at the end of the day so they can work through lunch and leave an hour early, something like that.
So 5 or 6 a day out of 36. Mm-hmm. That's pretty substantial, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Okay.
But they have the time, you know. I mean, I've got 3 31-year employees. The next one will hit 31 years Monday, and you know, they've got 5 weeks vacation plus all of our holidays plus 3 personal days, plus if they have a lot of extended illness time, they can trade 3 of those days over to personal days. So they're in essence, they get 6 or plus weeks a year.
Does your absenteeism impact the backlog?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the report?
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Swanson?
Sandy, one question
Sure.
on your cash book report. Page 2, the first line item, document storage, 15,000. That looks like a 30-day period. Is that normal? Over apparently 835
35
cases.
cases. So we get $20. Well, it depends. The fee that is added to a case is $20 per case, but it depends on what the person pays, and then the seniority or the hierarchy of when the money is collected. So they may pay $35, and so maybe only 5 of that goes towards the document storage fund, depending on where it falls in the hierarchy of what they pay.
Okay.
So I would have to go back and look at other months to see where we are on that. But the document storage and the automation fund are, when we did the Criminal Traffic Assessment Act for 2020, or July of 2019, we had to restructure everything. And so the county board, we have a resolution that we provided to the board, and then the board approved it. And so $50 goes towards the clerk, but it goes $10 to clerk, op, and admin, and then $20 to the automation fund and $20 to the document storage fund. And that money, the document storage, I'm heavy on salaries, in that I pay about $300,000 out of that fund for salaries. And then I do what microfilming that I can squeeze out of there, I do that. But most of it's salaries.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you. It's actually $293,298.93.
Is what I pay for salaries.
Out of that fund.
That's close.
Any other questions or comments on the report? We have Mr. Snipes.
Yes, I've had the opportunity to be in your office, and I know that it's constantly busy, and I will applaud you and the staff or whatever for doing what you have to do to make it work given the constraints that are in your office.
Thank you.
The storage in that is almost like you're boxed in. And I wish I could suggest that the county do like the city, the village of Bradley, and we could have bought that JCPenney's building for $577,000 to basically alleviate some of this storage or whatever, and probably do some other things. But how do you see, or do you see any other way in order to reduce some of that space in order to, because aesthetically that could be, that's kind of like rough on employees. That's just my opinion.
It is. I mean, the carpet was there in 1996 when I started, and it was old then, so it's still there. We can get all the documents digitized electronically, either microfilm it or scan it into the system, and then we can get rid of all the paper that we have. So that would alleviate a lot of the of that kind of storage. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I was thinking of that, so that you wouldn't be so congested. I was thinking, what's another way that we can look at trying to help alleviate a lot of that? It's just when you walk in, it's I don't want to say hoarder, but it's tight.
It's tight, yeah. So I've invited all of the county board members to the office for a tour, and I've had 3, and I've had Jasmine come in also. And Mr. Rowe came when Jasmine was there so that he could also get the tour, because he has never really seen the civil side and the other stuff that we have going on in the office as well. The offer's still open. I'd like whoever would like to come in, make an appointment and come see the office. It's an eye-opener. You see how busy we are.
Okay. Is this a question on the report? We haven't voted on the report yet. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. Have you, how much is it gonna cost if you digitize all your files?
Around $300,000.
Okay, so I did the math on the special funds, and you've got about $529,000 available outside of salaries and increases for next year to do that project.
In which fund, though?
Across all your special funds. The only one I don't know about that you couldn't use is e-citation, so I was gonna look into the legalities of that.
E-citation is strictly for traffic citation business. And then automation fund is regulated by a co-signature with the chief judge and myself. And so if the chief judge doesn't agree to anything, then it stays there. And it also, that money is going to be used towards any updates that we do. They're very protective of that money.
Well, so are we of ours.
Sure.
The taxpayers' money. So
Sure.
you have a request for us to pay for the digitization when you've collected fees from, that you've already described to Mr. Swanson's question for just that project, and there's more than enough there to do it.
In automation, in document storage.
Across the few that you can use that fund. And we've already passed a policy at the county board that says departments must use their special funds before the board will kick in with ARPA funds. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, we have to move the project in the basement forward, and those files are gonna move. It's just a matter of, it'd be nice if they moved into digitization instead of just another location that we have to travel to, or you do, and have to go back and forth.
Correct.
So how can we find out how much that's gonna cost
I have a quote.
for everything?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the process that they go through to get those files done?
So the company that I work with, we box everything up for them in their size boxes, because then they know when they know the sizes of their vans, so they know how many vans to send up or whatever. So then we package it all up. They store it while they're working on it. And the best part about that is if we have some random person coming in asking for a random file that happens to be one of the ones that is down there, they will go and pick that document or set of documents. They'll fax it to us, we give it to the person, and we're good to go.
Good.
That's the best case scenario. So if it takes them, 3 months, 6 months to get it done, they've got the storage facility for it. It's in the old Chanute Air Force Base, and it's in a completely temperature controlled, humidity controlled, everything controlled building. I've taken the tour a couple times, and it's a phenomenal building. And they have tons of space.
So how do we move this forward, is the question, because the money is there for you to use. We need to start working on and planning for the courthouse basement. So what do we do?
Well, I can propose it to the chief judge, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, well, can maybe set a meeting. I don't know if the chair of this committee would like to join us.
Sure.
To work through this, because we can't hold up construction on the space needs we have in the basement, the new jury assembly area, all the new office that's going to be down there for the future needs.
Future needs, right.
So we need to get going. So I appreciate that.
That's fine.
Yeah, we've got the numbers, so we just need to move forward.
Mr. Long.
Thank you. So the company that you're engaging with will digitize it. I assume it's searchable, so I could search for a group of names or dates or those kinds of things?
We have the index where we would know how to find them. If it's a very old case and it's in our old books, we would go through our books, find the case number, then we would have it on disc, and so we would know the case number, and then we could just go straight to that case number and open it up. It would be in our office, though. It wouldn't be anything that was online or available that way, but yes.
So it's hard files. Does it go to a mainframe and stored in a mainframe, or is it?
It's on disc, and it's like a CD that we would pop into the computer that we could add onto our system if we want. And then also it would be the mandate from the state of Illinois right now still for our records is to have them microfilmed for longevity. So I would get the digitized disc version and the tapes that
So
I
you
would,
get both of them.
yeah. So this way I'm covered for the longevity.
Mr. Hunter.
My second time, final time. Sandy, with respect to your operational needs and your aspirations and dreams, and as far as your office is concerned, other than fiscal issues, money, you know, what's your plan in terms of addressing the matters that the chairman has indicated, the items that Mr. Snipes mentioned as well too? If you had a magic wand, what would you do, you know, merge with what your plans are?
You mean like with the office?
What's your solution to the vicissitudes that confront your office? In other words, the stumbling blocks.
Well, the stumbling blocks is that we need to be accessible to the judges, and we need to be accessible to the public. So if we're available to be accessible to all of those people, you know, ideally, I would love to have if I'm waving a magic wand, I would love to have all of my staff in one room together. And I know in that courthouse that's nearly impossible without really upheaving a whole bunch of stuff. But it's difficult to keep an eye on people in 3 floors and in 5 offices, you know.
Okay.
I mean,
And you said that since you've been there, since what, 1995, you said?
I started in 96 as a
96.
clerk, but then I left and I came back in 2009.
Okay.
So for 12 years.
Okay, those boxes have been there since that time, right? And how long have you been the clerk?
The files,
Yeah, files.
well, I don't know if anybody's here that was here. When I came in, a few of you have taken the tour of the basement, and there was one section of the basement, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boxes. And upstairs above the garage, where the public works trucks are, the maintenance trucks are, there's a big room upstairs, and we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boxes of files up there too. And my predecessor had been trying to get the approval to get them, we have to go through a process to get those files to destroy them.
Okay, how long have you been in charge?
11 years.
Okay.
So when I became in charge, I followed that down, and we got rid of, I can't even tell you how many. The archivists came and brought a bunch of our files that they thought were historically significant and brought them down to ISU and are storing the live physical file there. And then, but we cleared out a ton of stuff in the basement. And so then as we can, I have a clerk that's what part of her job is to go through the files and get them ready to go to get microfilmed and the whole process. And for her to get 200 boxes together in a year, it takes her quite a while. Adding that into her other work that she does. So,
Do you have proteges who are similarly situated, or are you the lone wolf?
oh no, we're across the board in the state.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
So I also have, I'm reconvening the IGIS committee that we had set up previous, when I very first came on, and we started with court view, so that we can explore the ideas of what is to come if the board approves for us to move forward with that project. So other than that.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, the makeup of that committee is changing. I spoke with the chief judge, and we're going to be getting back on who's going to be on that committee. There's going to be some additions to the current list that Sandy sent over. So we'll be reaching out, and I think that it might be somebody from this committee might serve on that as well.
Okay.
So I think that somebody should be close to it from the board level, including Kevin Duvall needs to be part of this as well from the IT side of things.
IG secretary.
Yeah.
You know, and he was on it, and I forgot to include
okay.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks,
thank you.
Sandy. Up next, State's Attorney, Mr. Rowe.
I think we're gonna, Mr. Penwick has a meeting to get to, so he was
Okay.
asking if you could amend the agenda.
Take a motion to amend the agenda. Mr. Snipes, second by Mr. Lear. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Penwick. In your package, you have a copy of the Public Defender's Office. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Fairfield, second by Mr. Swanson. Comments on your report, Ed?
Nothing in particular. I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of the members have.
Any questions on the report? I got just one comment.
Certainly.
When we reached 2,000 traffic violations, we thought that was sort of blown out of the roof, but I see we're over 4,000 now, so.
It's a real problem. I have spoken and had minimal discussions on the issue. It's kind of a catch-22. You're, again, kind of like with Ms. Cianci, you're invited to come down and watch traffic court. I know Mr. Hunter did, right? And, you know, it's a high-volume call, and I've got one person down there, and I'm certainly not making excuses for that, but it is hard to navigate that many cases when you only have one person. As far as shifting personnel, I don't think that's in the cards at this time, but it's definitely an issue. I completely agree with you on that.
Any other questions or comments on the report? We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And my meeting's with the chief judge, so there is a nexus between where I'm going in this
Okay.
meeting. So I thank Mr. Rowe and everyone else for
Okay.
allowing me to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Rowe. In the package, you have a copy of the state's attorney's reports, the grand jury report, and the grand jury statistic report. Take a motion to approve, or combine and approve those two, Mr. Long and Mr. Hunter. Comments on the report, Jim?
You can see we're up to 636 grand jury indictments. Last grand jury added 52 to that. That is a huge number for our grand jury. In the past, kind of at the height of the backlog, we were capping that number at 40, because otherwise you've got your grand jurors there, you know, all day and all night. What we've done is we're going over that cap now so we can get more cases through the grand jury. However, we're starting earlier in the day. Marlo, do you know what time we start?
We start at 9. Go till about
9 a.m. Yeah, until it's over. So it's a little bit longer day for them, but we're able to get more cases through there. So that really is a significant number. And what that requires when we put 52 cases on the calendar for a grand jury, that requires those agencies to send their officers during a scheduled time to testify about their cases. So a lot of resources go into a grand jury proceeding because you're pulling officers off the street. So we really try to get them in and out as quick as we can. And you can see from those numbers, the majority of those are, again, domestics. You know, if Mr. Penwick was here, I don't know if any of you get the daily custody sheet, but for those of us that do, just yesterday, 4 people in custody, and that's just, you know, from the night before, and all violent domestic cases. Again, this morning, another violent domestic case on there. The other individuals on the custody sheet, I think, were 2 of them were warrant arrests, 1 might have been a retail. But domestics, unfortunately, continue to lead the way, and when you really get into the numbers, you've got 81 felony domestic batteries. I would remind everyone those are repeat offenders, strangulation cases, or cases where you have great bodily harm. You add to that the ag bat, so now you're looking at, those are charged differently because it's usually a child or a senior citizen, but those are usually still within the home. So those are domestic in nature, and then you've also got to remember a little bit further down, violation of order of protection. Many of those are misdemeanors, so by the time they get to the felony level, that's someone who has multiple prior violations of an order of protection. So that's brings you up to about 132. So 81 for domestics isn't really reflective. That number is a lot larger. Any questions about the grand jury report?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Hunter.
Excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You gave us the empirical data, and you have that, you guys have this information in front of you. In as much that you've given the grand jury activity and the pressure it puts on all those entities that you referenced in terms of your staff, your grand jury meeting from 9 o'clock until 4:30, as Mr. Jones has indicated. What are your operational needs given that set of circumstances that you have? Because you got to coordinate all that stuff, the cops, and that puts an impact on the local jurisdictions in terms of police departments, the police chiefs, and rearranging their staffing for the streets. What are your dire needs when it comes to this situation?
Well, one challenge we've had specifically around the grand jury is a court reporter. It's very hard actually to find court reporters. Locally, there's really no private court reporters anymore, so you have to have someone that will travel for grand jury and then can turn those...
Let me stop you there. No possibility of that being a course at KCC? No?
I really don't know.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if KCC offers that, but I know the market for court reporters is pretty slim. So you've got to get someone that will not only travel, but then can turn those transcripts around very quickly. And when you have a higher volume number of cases, that becomes difficult for a lot of the court reporters. So our expenses for court reporters have gone up significantly. Might be offset by a little bit last year because we did preliminary hearings because grand jury wasn't convened due to COVID restrictions. But there's still expenses. And they're not only charging you for the time they're there, but then they charge you by the page. And sometimes it's $3 and something per page, $4 a page for what they type, and that's double spaced, big font, so it adds up pretty quick. We've put it, we don't have to put it out to bid because it's a professional service. We have put it out to bid, so we try to get the most competitive rates we can, but sometimes when you only get one bid and you have to have a court reporter there, you're stuck. So I may at some point be coming back to the board for a few more dollars for court reporter fees.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we have an attorney who does the conviction integrity. It's important to have someone's eyes on those cases. So every case that comes into our system, we're not just looking at conviction integrity at the back end after the person's been convicted. We want to catch problems at the front end. So that individual scans every case before it goes to grand jury, presents them at the grand jury to make sure there's an additional level of eyes and integrity in that process. So we're pretty well set with staffing for grand jury. The challenge there is the court reporter fees. And you're talking, maybe on average it used to be around 30,000. I'm guessing that with the increased number of cases, transcripts, we're probably going to be somewhere around 50 to 60,000 in court reporter fees. And it's just something I can't do anything about that.
Okay, you've specified that you're okay regarding the grand jury staff, with the exception of the court reporters. And you're generating a lot of activity. Overall, what are your dire needs? I mean, really, what you need?
We want, I want to be able to, like Ms. Cianci or Clerk Cianci was saying about scanning documents. We've got a lot of documents that we store, some for a limited period of time, and then the state allows you to shred them. A lot of the documents, though, are for sex cases, murder cases, and I'd like to start taking domestics because those can always be used later. And they should be kept forever because the post-conviction appeal process could go on, for decades sometimes. So those documents, we've got them stored, I think, over in the old Veterans Building in the basement, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe just in there. I'd really like to get those scanned. It's a challenge every time we need to get one, and those should be better preserved. If something happens to those files, that may be the only record, for instance, of a sex assault. It could be problematic if we didn't have those available to us if something came back on appeal. So I'm going to try to get some bids to see what it would cost to get those records scanned. Coroner Gessner and Deputy Coroner Cavender, they went through a process with some of their records with a company that seemed to work out well for them. Seemed like it was reasonably priced. So we're going to look at that. You know, staffing, it's always an issue in every department, especially in the courthouse when you have this sudden influx of all these cases and a significant backlog. So I know that's not only touching my office, public defender's office as well.
Can you be more specific in terms of turnover and attrition rate?
Sure. So we've had 2 employees stolen from us by the judiciary with Nancy Nicholson and Brenda Claudio. Those were big hits to our office. Brenda prosecuted every significant sex assault case probably in the last 20 years in Kankakee County. So to have that expertise leave, that presents a challenge in itself. Another one of our attorneys, Mark Laws, moved to Michigan. Clyde Galamo moved to DeKalb County. Erica Hamer moved up to Monee and is with Will County. Same with Sarah West, moved up into Will County and is working with their state's attorney's office. So when you start to look at that, that's a big loss to our office all at one time. The challenge is, we've had ads out and the resumes just aren't coming in like they used to. I'm told back in the day you would put an ad and you could get 200 resumes. And you didn't even have to read them all. You'd read the first 10, bring them in, and you could hire someone. Statewide, States Attorneys Association, public defenders' offices statewide, we're not seeing that anymore. In this type of economy, the private sector is able to pull people in at significant salaries. If I can offer 50, they can offer 150. So we may post, we could spend $1,000 to post help wanted ads, and we may get 2 resumes, and they may be individuals who have 0 experience as criminal prosecutors. So I'm not willing to bring in someone that's not ready to do the job. At the same time, we're really got our backs up against the wall right now. So that presents a challenge. In addition to that, you have the backlog of cases. And not only the backlog, the stuff that we couldn't get to trial last year, but all the increase in domestics, violent domestics that have come into the system. You've got Miller cases coming back. That's where kids who were under the age of 18 were prosecuted as adults, and they received a sentence in excess of 40 years. The U.S. Supreme Court in Miller v. Alabama, and then the Buffer case, which is an Illinois Supreme Court, combine those two, the law basically now says if you were a juvenile tried as an adult and you were sentenced to over 40 years, that was a de facto life sentence. They have to come back for a resentencing hearing. That resentencing hearing, they call it a Miller hearing, so you have to have a Miller expert testify. That means the defense gets a Miller expert to come in and say all the reasons that the kid should be released or should get, a significantly less sentence. And then the state, I've got to have a Miller expert to counter that, to say why 40 years wasn't unreasonable, or 70 if it was a really heinous crime, to argue for what we think a proper sentence would be. And sometimes 40 is excessive, so it could be reduced. But those experts cost money. You're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 every time. And if you think back, how many people under 18 were sentenced as adults in this county over the history of the county, right, that are still alive, still possibly even in custody if they had a long sentence. That's significant. The state law just changed on Class X felonies. It used to be if you had 3 prior convictions, they call it a 2 on a 2 on a 2. So if you were convicted of a Class 2 felony once, convicted of a Class 2 felony a second time, and then you got a 2 or higher a third time, it's automatic Class X sentencing. So instead of sentencing you to a Class 2 level, we're going to increase it, and you're going to face 6 to 30 years. 2 on a 2 on a 2. The state just changed the law. Now it's those 2 on a 2 on a 2 only count if you were over 21 at the time of the offense. So they basically upped that age, right, from 18 to 21. A lot of people fall in that gap. Most gun offenses are going to be 2s or higher. And most people that we see in our county committing the gun violations, gun offenses, are younger. That 17, 18, 19, 20-year age. All of those cases in the history of the county, 2 on a 2 on a 2, are going to come back for resentencing. So, I mean, it doesn't just start effective today and going forward. So you open the floodgates on not only what we're looking at now and in the future, but everything that's been done in the past. We're starting to see come back into the system and having to defend it.
So what I've heard thus far, the court reporters is a need, the scanning documents and records and so forth, the exodus of losing the expertise, brain trust in your office, and you need these experts, and the Miller cases. Are there other, vicissitudes or needs that you're going to have to address?
You know, with the ARPA money, I've spoken with Chairman Wheeler, with Chief Judge Kramer, leadership in my office, and we're looking at maybe a clerk and a prosecutor. The prosecutor position, in part, it would be grant funded with some money we have on a sex prosecutor grant, but maybe I could use some ARP funds to supplement that salary so we could lure someone that maybe is a more experienced sex assault prosecutor, violent domestic battery prosecutor, because that's really, I mean, with COVID, we've seen that huge increase in domestics. So I think that is definitely a need, someone to come in and handle that specific caseload. And you really want a trained prosecutor for those cases.
Not only have you, in my estimation, justified your need, but I'm at just 1 out of 28. But I've heard consistently Judge Bradshaw Elliott talking about the escalation of domestics. And I think everybody's heard that. And it resonated with me in terms of people, families being in close proximity, losing their jobs and all that stuff, and those numbers have gone sky high. And I think you have had private conversations with me. I think aren't you on Harbor House Board or something?
Yeah.
And you've shared some things that they're confronted with as well too. So, and as much as you said you've articulated some of your needs with the Chief Judge and the Chairman Wheeler, will you be coming forth with a proposal for the ARPA funds?
I spoke with Chairman Wheeler this morning, actually briefly. I told him I'd get my request in shortly here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, hang on. Is this a question about the report? We're getting it.
Yeah, we're mixing it up.
Yeah.
Can I just end that conversation?
Yes. Go ahead.
Both Mr. Pennewick had mentioned that, I want to say the COVID recovery team, if you will, to get the cases through the courts, and that's what Jim's talking about. And the circuit clerk had mentioned that as well. So we're trying to figure out with budgets and everything how to balance the $5 million loss in revenue that we're dealing with because of the changes in the state laws this year. And then how do we still accomplish and work through speedy trial and everything else that Jim's talking about, and the backlog and all of the other stuff we're talking about, and also considering we can't find people. I mean, it's really the perfect storm. And I just want to let the committee know I was trying to get numbers together and he was trying to get the request together so we can have something formal to talk about. But you still have the problem of finding people to do it. That's where you're at.
The challenge with finding people to do it is the salaries that we're able to offer.
Right.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. You know, Will County's able to hire people away from us because they're offering them $20,000 more a year that we can even come close to. So.
Okay. Any other questions on the reports? Mr. Snipes.
Yeah. Oh, we can vote on the report, and then I can still ask the question if you want.
This has nothing to do with the reports. I want to get the reports.
I'm going back to the domestic because I need to know if there is are we putting mental health services in those areas where we're dealing with those domestic violence cases?
So you're asking if we're treating the offenders?
Means that as a part of the resolution, do they have to attend some type of mental health training, services, so that they can maybe overcome anger management or whatever?
No, we don't require that, but all the science and data, if Harbor House was here, they would be screaming right now, because domestic violence is just not tied to mental health. It's not tied to anger management. If it was, right, if your anger issue was what drove the domestic violence, then you would punch your boss. You would beat up a stranger on the street because you're just doing it out of anger. Domestic violence is specifically targeted at their partner, at their spouse, and it's really ultimately comes down to power and control. Now it's not even tied to addiction. It's not tied to being drunk or high. It's about power and control, because people that are drunk and high don't walk down the street and punch everybody they see. If they take it out on their spouse. So that's what makes domestic violence of significant concern, because it's driven by the offender and without excuse. The challenge with that is we've got enough work to do in providing resources to the survivors of domestic violence. I can't even begin to think of putting resources into the offenders right now. There are programs out there. Hope and Choices are two local organizations that provide domestic violence counseling through a court-driven DV diversion program, but that's not coming out of our office. We're trying to scrape every dollar we can for the survivors.
Okay, I thought it was something like they would have to pay for, similar to a drivers when they have to go take a driver's ed class, because even though I do know that it's targeted towards a domestic space, the family or the spouse, but at some point in time, we can address the issues on the one side, which is definitely plausible, but at the same time, that individual again screams help in some kind of way, because apparently they're out of control, and some kind of way it needs to be addressed, other than just going into jail, then coming back out and doing it again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the reports? Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Collins, you had a question.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, last meeting rather, the assistant public defender voiced her personal opinion that gun ownership leads to increased gun violence. I had a couple questions for her, and I was asked to direct them towards you, which is what I wanted to do anyways. According to CDC statistics, gun ownership not only reduces but drastically reduces violence in our communities. I can cite those numbers if you'd like. In 2019, we had 39,707 firearm-related deaths in the country. Of those, 60%, 6 out of 10 of them were suicides. And the CDC, according to cdc.gov, this is all very easy to search, said that their estimates put the number of lives saved from gun ownership between 60,000 and 2.5 million lives saved every year, which clearly says that gun ownership leads to less gun-related deaths. So in regards to the violence that we've been seeing in Kankakee, there's some statistics. Black gun ownership in America is significantly lower than white gun ownership. In contrast to that, the majority of gun violence is committed by minorities. To me, that would suggest that in our minority communities, if we were to increase legal, responsible gun ownership, that eventually that would transfer over to the kids that are committing these crimes. Most of the firearm homicide rates are committed by people between 15 and 34 years of age. And what that tells me is that we have a demographic of young people in this country that grow up not learning how to respect firearms and not having that value for life that responsible firearm owners usually pass on to their children. With that being the case, going forward, should we be encouraging not only all of our members of Kankakee County, but in particular our minority communities, especially with the burden put on law enforcement currently, to be exercising their Second Amendment right and protecting themselves and their own community as best they can, rather than depending on your office and the police departments in our county to do that for them. And then also going forward with the overload of court cases, I suggested that we consider last month it looks like there's roughly 6,000 cases that are awaiting court dates in our county. Of those, 4,000 of them are traffic cases. I suggested that we go through those traffic cases in an effort to lessen our workload and dismiss any of them that did not involve an injured party. I also wanted to suggest last month that when we consider that, we do not take into account the revenue from those tickets, as the counterbalance of that would be weighing whether or not we're doing what's right to provide people their constitutional right to a speedy trial. And as you know, the moratorium on a speedy trial is going to end up, and that is going to swamp court systems across the country. After the meeting last month, that very day, I actually saw an article from NPR, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but that stated that counties across the entire nation are dismissing traffic cases that do not involve injured parties in an effort to mitigate the impending wave of people filing for their right to a speedy trial. So I just wanted to know what your position was on all of those things, please, Jim?
That's a lot. It's like my whole job.
Yeah.
So guns, I own a gun. It didn't make me less violent. It didn't make me more violent. But I own my firearm legally. And if you want to own a firearm in the state of Illinois, you have to do so within the law. If the law requires a FOID, you've got to get a FOID. If you want to carry it concealed and loaded, you've got to have a CCL license, and you can only carry it in those areas where it's permitted under law. I'm all for responsible gun ownership. I'm not going to even talk about this, though, in the context of race, because I think it's stereotyping, and I think it's quite frankly, it's improper to say that minorities commit more gun crimes or violent offenses. The reality is violent people commit violent crimes, and criminals commit crimes. Whether you're white or black, Hispanic, it's really quite irrelevant. And it's irrelevant not only to policy, but it's also irrelevant to our work in the prosecutor's office. We've changed it so when a case comes in, there used to be a screen sheet. We don't even list the person's race at the top of that screen sheet, because you certainly don't want bias to come into play, but you also don't even want implicit bias to come into play when you're making those charging decisions. So how this state's attorney's office looks at it is we look at it, what is the law, and is there a violation of the law here? And if there is a violation of the law also dictates the charge and the consequence. So, we play it by the book. When you want to talk about violent gun offenses, there's so much that underlies that. In our community, the majority of the shootings in the city of Kankakee, I believe if the police chief was here, he would tell you, they're being committed by juveniles. There are a lot of kids running around this community shooting.
15 to 34 is the statistic, yeah.
Sure, and I would say in our community, we don't really see a lot of probably 24 to 34-year-olds committing violent offenses with firearms. We're seeing that 15 to 24. And among those, especially the juveniles, I say it in jest, but if I could take 12 kids out of our community and I could name them and relocate them, the shootings would go down probably by 90% in the city of Kankakee. The city of Kankakee is a minority majority city. It is a very good city. It's a strong city. It's a safe city. But there are individuals in that city, white included, who are committing violent crimes.
Well, I in no way intended to, suggest that color has any dictation on how people choose to conduct themselves in society.
Sure.
But statistically, the majority of violent crimes are committed by minorities aged 15 to 34, and minorities own guns legally at a much lower rate than non-minorities. And to me, that suggests that if we increase the number of minorities that legally own guns, I'm encouraging our minorities to exercise their Second Amendment right in an effort to bring that responsibility to their families. And I know that you preach that everything starts at home when it comes to the violence in our community especially. And I think that if we were to, going forward, and I'm not talking about in the next couple months, I'm talking about in the next couple generations, encouraging in particular all of our citizens, but in particular our minorities, where these crimes seem to be coming from, the majority of them, that we could institute better parenting skills, better life skills, and better value of life in our young people going forward. I would love to see programs in our town, preferably by not-for-profit organizations, that go into encourage people and teach them how to properly go about obtaining a firearm, legally obtaining a firearm, and passing that knowledge on to their children to make them more safe. There's been a lot of talk, obviously, with COVID-19 and what people's obligation is morally to society to keep each other safe. And according to the CDC, gun ownership makes people more safe. I would say that it is a moral responsibility of people that want to live in a safe society to defend themselves, and that going forward we should encourage the Second Amendment to be exercised by all of our citizens in the community.
I have no issue with legal, responsible gun ownership if someone wants to exercise their Second Amendment. I do. I carry.
Is that something we should encourage, though?
I don't think that's the state's attorney's job to encourage people to bring guns into their homes or to discourage them from bringing guns into their homes. I simply, I support legal, responsible gun ownership.
Okay.
As far as the traffic matters, when you look at that number, 4,000 traffic cases, and you can say that there's a number of those without an injured party. Thank God, first of all, that the number of those 4,000 don't have injured parties. But I can tell you that many of those cases are DUIs that are pending in the system and have been in there for quite a long time. Mr. Pennewick spoke to his one prosecutor. What he's talking about is courtroom 200. So those numbers aren't necessarily 109 cases. Courtroom 200 is aggravated traffic call. So you're talking about DUIs. You're talking about people who, usually if you get caught driving without insurance and you come into court and you show proof of insurance, the goal there is compliance. Okay, but on your second time of getting caught with driving without insurance, now what you're doing is you're putting that burden on the other driver if you do strike someone. The law requires you to have insurance. If every time I keep dismissing insurance tickets and I'm waiting for that person to have an accident where then there is an injured party, then that injured party goes without any type of compensation. They bear the burden for their own medical bills and they're driven into bankruptcy. I simply can't have a process or a system that puts people at that risk. I sit down with every family that loses someone due to a drunk driver's irresponsible actions of getting behind the wheel. So when we get a drunk driver, whether it's the first time or the fourth time, we go hard in those cases because those are the cases that put all of our families' lives and all of our lives at risk. And it is gut-wrenching to sit down with parents when their kid gets killed by a stupid-ass drunk driver who just got behind the wheel and took out potentially a family or a kid or a grandmother. That's really hard work. The other cases you're gonna see in there are reckless driving. That's why it's an aggravated traffic call. These are not stop sign tickets. These are not, kids who get a speeding ticket. Most of those cases are diverted anyways. They go to KCC, they get the traffic school. It's about learning, it's about compliance. Even people that come in and maybe they get caught driving and their license was expired, come in with your renewed license, we dismiss the ticket. This is not a revenue operation. No one in our courtroom knows anything about how much of a fine or a fee goes to which departments. The majority of it, to be honest with you, doesn't even come to the county. I think the state's attorney's office might get $1 a ticket. That $4,000, if I got a conviction on every one of those, that $4,000 isn't gonna buy pencils, to be honest with you. So revenue doesn't drive the bus there, it's about public safety.
I would just say that all the county board members that I talked to over the last month, that was their very first point, was that no one would want to support this because of the loss of revenue. And that was the opinion of several board members. And I also suggested that we go through on a case-by-case basis and see which tickets
Lair.
would be.
We do that every time that case comes up. So every time the case comes up in court, our prosecutors in that courtroom have very specific guidelines that they follow in the prosecution of every case. On a DUI death case, every single time we're going for 14 years, which is the maximum sentence. On an expired license, every single time you come in with a renewed license or a valid license, we're dismissing it. So we do that review.
Going forward, what are your hopes to
hang on,
tackle?
Jake, hang on. Mr. Lear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regard to the issue of traffic stops, no one on this board makes a traffic stop, so we're not the ones that are deciding what is the basis for a traffic stop. I've sat here and heard the sheriff say many times the purpose of traffic stops is because speed kills. Speed leads to accidents, which the sheriff has been very adamant he wants to reduce. It leads to fatalities. He has pointed to the fact that his instructions to his deputies are to be conscious that speed is what leads to fatalities, and thus that should be the motivation behind traffic tickets. I believe that's how our Sheriff's Department is operating.
Okay,
May I finish?
go ahead.
Well, I would argue that speed doesn't lead to fatalities, collisions lead to fatalities. But Jim, going forward, what are your hopes? And first of all, I'd like to reiterate, as I often do, that I'm really thankful that we have such a attentive and thoughtful state's attorney as yourself, and I really appreciate a lot of things that you do. What are your hopes and aspirations to tackle the impending wave of people filing for speedy trial?
We're just going to have to be ready on those cases. You know, the reality is now on any given jury Monday, sometimes you go into a courtroom, you've got 18 cases set for jury trial. You can try one case in a courtroom at a time. But that means that on the state side, right, each defense attorney on those cases, they have to be ready for their one case. On our case, our 2 or 3 prosecutors in that courtroom have to be ready for 18 trials, and then only one of them goes. So you spend your entire weekend preparing for 6 or 7 trials each that don't even happen. But we're just going to have to be ready, you know, whether it's longer hours, if we can get people in to fill these positions, great. But I'm not going to be backed into a corner where I have to decide which cases I'm going to dismiss. So we're going to have to be ready. If that means we have to bring judges in from other counties to preside over trials, make other space available. Iroquois has volunteered in the past to bring some judges in. They're in the same circuit. If we have to try the cases in a Will County courthouse, we'll call them and ask them. But the cases, Jake, that you got to understand, man, the cases that are pending are felony cases, right? Those are the ones that are going to trial. Especially the ones that are in custody, they have the shorter speedy period. And I think the sheriff would tell you, we check that list regularly to see who's in custody. These are sex, child molesters, domestic abusers who have strangled a woman. They're like some of the most violent. You know, the nonviolent offenses under the state law, those people are not in custody anymore. So the wave is coming. We're going to figure a way to weather it. But I'm not going to be, this office is not going to be in a position where I have to pick who am I going to let out today and who am I going to prosecute today. We are going to be ready to go to trial in those cases.
Are we going to be able? Will we be able to guarantee everyone their constitutional right to a speedy trial?
The Constitution guarantees that. That's more powerful than any of us.
Will we adhere to that?
So if they have a speedy demand, right? So let's say the moratorium on speedy trials is lifted, which I think is coming in October. If that's lifted and someone makes a demand for a speedy trial and they're not taken to trial within that period, which varies depending on in custody or out of custody, if that time runs, that case is dismissed. It's not even to our discretion, right? The Constitution controls that. But I'm telling you, our office is not going to be in a position where those cases come up for trial and we answer not ready and the case is dismissed. And that would be a public safety disaster. Well, you could potentially have a murderer get out.
Once again, to clarify, I didn't suggest even entertaining the idea of not prosecuting any case that involves a victim.
Yeah, we're gonna be ready on those.
Okay. Mr. Snipes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I appreciate the long dialogue regarding the Second Amendment, I would that we limit the scope of the meeting to the issues that are germane to the agenda in its narrative, in that we have some other things to do. So just want to make a point of clarification.
Who is that? I'm sorry, was that Robert Snipes? I got that wrong. One last thing real quick. Teen court is going great. We're able to do eight cases every month, which is keeping, 16 a month. You're keeping almost 148, 150 cases out of the system a year for kids. So that's important.
Yeah. We need to move on to draft amendment for the county code section 30.1, vehicle seizure and impoundment.
Mr. Coughlin, if you want to speak to that.
We need a motion and a second on this before we get into that. Ms. Parker and Mr. Kirkstra. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. As was brought up recently by the sheriff, there's recently been some new legislation that allows municipalities that are not home rule municipalities to get administrative fees when vehicles are impounded due to violations of the law. What this basically does is puts in our ordinance for the county, so that the county, we set up a system where every time somebody gets arrested for serious violation. The car is impounded. In order to get it out, they would have to post a $500 bond that will be coming, a portion of that would be coming back to the county. We set up a due process is guaranteed in that what we will have to institute is we'll have to have, at the time, you'll have to send them a notice that they're entitled to a hearing to contest the probable cause on the stop. That would be done probably, what I envision anyway, is that we will set up a regular call, probably here, on one afternoon a month, in which a hearing officer for the county would bring anybody that showed up would have an opportunity to have a hearing. It specifically sets forth that an assistant state's attorney with more than 3 years of experience can be the hearing officer, so you wouldn't be looking at additional expense of hiring an outside hearing officer. And they would then come in, and then anybody that doesn't come in will then get the $500 then would come back to the county. So, does anybody have any questions on that?
Questions? Mr. Snipes?
Is that more like administrative adjudication?
Yes, absolutely. Right, it's not a punitive criminal adjudication, it's administrative, civil in nature.
And it's always thought that if they had a difference, that they would go, they within that.
Come up to your mic, Bob, so.
They have that 35 days to go appeal to the circuit court.
Right,
process.
right. It specifically references the Administrative Review Act, so that if they don't like the decision, they have 35 days to basically file a lawsuit in the circuit court.
Any other questions? Mr. Hunter?
Am I missing this, John? Violation of not having insurance is not listed here, or what?
It's here.
I don't think it is, actually.
Is there a reason why it's not there?
Because it was not one of the things that was listed in the new legislation.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Wheeler?
So this is all new? I don't have a copy of the old fees and procedures. This is all
It sounds like, in speaking with Mr. Coughlin, I think previously, like the current county code just adopts state law.
Right, the current county code has that, my understanding is that the prior administration, prior state's attorney's office said that because Kankakee County was not home rule, that we were prohibited from collecting that $500 that was set forth in an earlier statute that allowed seizures of automobiles. I don't necessarily agree with that legal opinion. However, the state specifically came down with new legislation that specified non-home rule municipalities are able to do this. What this does is brings that new legislation in, and then sets up a process in which we can follow through and get these monies and have that process, but also give people give them an opportunity to be heard in front of a lawyer.
Are ATVs considered vehicles?
We'd have to look, and then I think it depends also on like what are the CCs on the ATV. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that fall into that, but we can get you a clear definition of that.
Okay. Just curious, because that obviously we'd love to have that as a threat of driving ATVs around.
Sure.
Down 17 or whatever else,
and thank you, Mr. Hunter. Number 11 is uninsured motor vehicle, so it's on there. It's just
number 11. Yeah. Right. Mr. Snipes.
Just one other question. Given the United States Supreme Court case in Timms versus I believe it was Indiana, where they dealt with the excessive fees, is this in accordance or aligned with that ruling?
Well, it should be in that the $500 administrative fee is pretty much standard across Illinois as far as what municipalities charge in just these type of cases. So I would, without going to the Supreme Court on the matter, I would say that it should be in compliance.
Collins.
As a person that at one point received a ticket for no insurance because I owned 2 vehicles and I had the wrong card in the wrong car, hypothetically, if I were pulled over leaving today and I had the wrong insurance card, could my vehicle be impounded?
An uninsured motor vehicle can be impounded.
Not uninsured, I just didn't have the proper documentation. So would you impound my vehicle pending a court date to prove that I had the proper documentation?
It would probably be officer discretion, okay? But in that instance, if you're driving a vehicle without proof of insurance, it's going to be considered an uninsured motor vehicle. It could be impounded at that point, but that's why there's that due process component to it. I know it's an inconvenience. It could be a terrible inconvenience, but that due process component would allow you to recover that vehicle.
That terrible inconvenience could lead to people losing their jobs,
Yes.
their life, ending relationships. And literally the line here says it shall not be necessary for criminal charges to be filed, prosecuted, and or proven in order to demonstrate that one of the following violations has been committed. What that says is that you're guilty before you're proven innocent.
Well, actually, it doesn't say that. What it's saying is that, because otherwise what it would say, it would cause you...
I'll rephrase it. It says that you can be punished without being proven guilty.
Well, what it does is it separates the administrative side, the civil side, from the criminal side. Because if it didn't say that, then what that would guarantee is that if you got pulled over for no insurance, you would absolutely be prosecuted by my office. That would be the flip side of that, which you wouldn't want. So what that does is it separates it. So the criminal side, we still have discretion whether we would file criminal charges or not. But on the civil side, you're not guilty until proven innocent, or you know, fined until proven innocent. You have that due process component.
So if I were to receive a ticket and then my vehicle was impounded and then I later proved that I was insured, would that $500 be restored to me?
Yes.
And
That's the whole reason for the...
Would any damages that I incurred because of the loss of my vehicle be restored to me? If I lost my job because I couldn't go to work?
If they pursued that in a civil suit, I don't know what a court would order, but it would not be done through the administrative process. It just, state law doesn't allow for that.
Can we all recognize the slippery slope of punishing people for a crime they've not been convicted of?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, you know, that's in drug forfeiture as well, right? You can go in and you can catch someone stealing drugs.
Also a huge problem in our country.
A huge problem, but here's the flip side of that. If you give someone the drugs and their drug money back, they've suffered no consequence, right? So that's a way to get those drugs, to get maybe the proceeds that they're using to fund their drug business off the street, but still allowing us on the criminal side to offer perhaps treatment as opposed to a felony conviction. So there's always a counterbalance to it.
I don't think we have enough time in the day to dip into civil asset forfeiture.
Agreed.
Okay, any other questions on the issue?
You need to vote on that.
Mr. Snipes, this will be the third time.
Second.
Third.
No, we was on another conversation, but this is something kind of grabbed me. If a person has they didn't have the insurance card or was the wrong vehicle. Well, if a person is fully insured, no matter what, they will still be an insured driver of the vehicle that they're driving. Would that not be the case?
Yeah, but you have to prove it. You have to show some proof of insurance. I mean, you can use your cell phone.
No, I'm talking about, he said he has his insurance card, but he said I had the wrong card. Well, the first card would show that the person has insurance. Or don't let me say that would be a proof, because there's some people that get in the card and then all of a sudden they stop the payment and then they got a card saying that they're insured when they are not. But for the most part, individuals that have a card generally show that they are insured. Even if it was the wrong card, they are insured for whatever vehicle that they're driving at the time. I thought that is
okay.
Is that, I mean, would they just, with that being a...
State law requires you to have proof of insurance at a traffic stop. If you tell the officer you have insurance, you don't have it with you, it's going to be the officer's discretion. But the officer would be fully within his right to say, if you can't provide proof of insurance at this traffic stop, I'm going to issue you a ticket for driving without insurance or without proof of insurance. And the vehicle could be towed at that point pursuant to an admin tow. Absolutely.
Right, but what I was saying is...
It would be like if you had a gun and you had your gun license at home and you can't provide it at the time. That's a problem. There's certain things you have to carry. If you didn't have any ID on you, you could be cited for no ID. You just got to have the insurance in the car or on your phone even. Digital copies are valid.
Mr. Wheeler.
If there's no more first times, I'll call a question.
Thanks.
Okay. All right.
Now, there is a first time. Ms. Peters had a question.
Okay.
She's not.
That's why I
Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had two friends. They were hit by people, caused accidents or damage to their vehicles. Both times they came up and said they had insurance card. They gave all the information. When they got home and called that insurance company, there was no insurance. So what do you do at that point? Because both times it seems like they know what they're doing, because if they call the person and say you don't have insurance, then that person both times has called the police and said they're harassing me.
Yeah,
So then they can't do anything.
Usually,
So-
if you get in that situation, you call the police, you say the insurance they provided, they did not have valid insurance. The police can write a ticket for no insurance after the fact.
Okay, that didn't happen, but,
Yeah.
so, all right.
They can though, and we would go forward on it.
Thanks.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the draft amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries.
Last thing we have is Marlo Jones. He was going to briefly talk about the NCFI and his experience. For those of you that don't know Marlo, Marlo is the chief of our criminal division. He has been since my first day in office, and does a great job with that. And this was a unique experience.
Good morning.
Good luck. You got to come up to the mic,
I'll sit
Marlo.
here?
Yep.
Okay. Back in April, I had the opportunity to attend a forensic analysis course in Alabama. It was hosted by the Secret Service in partnership with the Alabama Prosecutors Association. It was a great course. It goes in line with kind of Jim Rowe's philosophy of making sure we have all the evidence we need to charge cases properly. We were trained in the law on the most recent updates with extracting cell phones. Many of us have cell phones. Many of us have a lot of personal information on cell phones. And there's been a trend in the courts to restrict access. A few years ago, a police officer gets a warrant, they dump everything on the phone. They're getting more particular now because people are getting so used to using their phones, they have so much information that we're gonna now get access to stuff that we probably shouldn't. So they were indoctrinating us on this philosophy. So we also had an opportunity to do some practical downloads and extractions, and it cost the county nothing. The federal government paid for my travel there. They paid for the housing, food. So it was a great course. We also can send our judges there, so we will advertise that opportunity when it comes up to our circuit court judges and associate judges. Other prosecutors can go. They don't have a class yet for defense attorneys, but if they do, we would offer that up as well. So I just wanted to let you know it was a great experience, and we are trying again to do the right thing when it comes to every single person that we evaluate for a criminal charge. Okay. Any questions?
Questions? Mr. Snipes.
Hi, Ronald. Did they determine the, I guess, where the borderline of perimeter is when it comes to the right of privacy to your personal information versus when it is actually confiscated, and to what degree the other side can go before they kind of meet the border?
Yes, they did. They gave us some examples. For example, let's say you pull a person over, they have a gun in the car, but you don't, the gun is not on their person, it's in the car. Oftentimes police will ask to download pictures on the phone to see if that person's holding the weapon, or if there's text messages about it. What had been happening was police departments just get every single thing on the phone, as opposed to specifically looking for photographs or text messages. So the courts are now making us, as prosecutors, and making the police use more specificity. Because if I download something on that phone that is not within the scope of what I'm looking for example, gun. So let's say I find child porn on the phone. Well, you have to stop that analysis at that point, get another warrant to go and then search further. Or if you see evidence of other crimes. In the past, you didn't have to do that. You just download it all and say, oh, wait a second, we now have child porn, or we have evidence of other crimes, and they try to use that against the defendant. But now we need to be more deliberate. We'd have to ask for more permissions to obtain that information. So the court's tightening it up. So, okay.
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you. And I want to thank you publicly for, you will be participating in a project which I'm involved in with my church in the community. On August 21st from 1 to 3 at the corner of Evergreen and East Willow, we're blocking the street off, and Mr. Jones will be presenting. Oftentimes, you know, when we talk about all the different crime, we need the cooperation of the public. And they need to understand how charges are filed and how the process is facilitated. And Mr. Jones is going to speak to that along with the Chief of Investigations for the City of Kankakee and another matter that deals with public health, Rosie Jones, who's the director of the clinics in School District 111, will be presenters. So I would encourage a lot of you folks, your churches, relatives, friends in the community to participate in this project. Refreshments, Mr. Snipes, will be provided. And an ancillary question that I wasn't able to present. You or Jim can present to us the kind of soft money that you guys bring in terms of grants. Can you speak to that, Jim?
The soft money we bring in for grants?
Yeah. Overall.
You know, we've got a lot of grants. I mean, we use the grants to fund the sex prosecutors, domestic violence prosecutors, drug prosecutors. Those are all grant-funded positions. We have a stolen auto theft task force that's funded by the state.
Division. Community division.
Community division is entirely grant-funded. I mean, I can do a summary maybe at the next meeting.
And a match is only, match is what, 20% of that, or most of them are just?
So most of those grants are, right, they're fully funded. The county's match is the fringe.
Okay, okay.
There's not a grant where like they give us 100, but we have to give them 20. I think the only one that may have some requirements like that is the AmeriCorps grant, if I'm not mistaken, and that we've been able to match with in-kind funds and special funds. Like drug forfeiture funds you can use for drug prevention, for instance. But the other stuff, the county carries the fringe cost. For like, so our sex prosecutors, you have to have sex prosecutors. So the county can either pay 100% plus fringe, or you can just pay fringe. So those grants help out in that way.
Substantial, then. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marlo. Up next, the Probation Department, Mr. Latham. In your package, you have a copy of the monthly report. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Hunter, second by Mr. Swanson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Comments?
I have nothing to comment on the monthly report unless anyone has any questions. It's pretty much.
Any questions on the report, Mr. Hunter?
Not necessarily a report per se, but Tom, I've had several conversations with you regarding assistance that can be provided to 501c3s, organizations, other units of government, churches, etc. Could you reiterate the public service assistance for those entities which I just talked about?
Yeah, well, July 19th, we got the building back open, which meant public service work was open and operating, up and running. And it's going very smooth. We've worked with Judge Cunnington and Judge Nicholson, which a lot of that public service work comes from their courtrooms. And it's what we're doing now, though, is building that list, building that pool of people. It's taking some time, but it's building. So the next phase, and I was going to discuss that actually, the next phase now is to go out into the community and meet with groups, meet with the nonprofits, just tell them about the public service work program, tell them how they can get that information to us and be put on our list. and then we can start assigning people to them. Does that answer your question, Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
In fact, I brought cards. Anybody can have one. These are in the courthouse. They're in our office. They're all over. There's a QR code on there that once you put your phone over that, it'll bring you right to our website that has everything on there. And I would appreciate if everybody looked at that website and came back to me with any areas of you're confused or thought there could be more information on there or anything about it. But that website, and I think I discussed it last time, really is a one-stop shop for everybody as far as 501(c) or nonprofit that need people. They can request them through that website. We review it and then assign people to that agency. So I'd appreciate if everyone took one today and checked it out and came back and said how you thought the website worked.
Yeah, I'm going to use it for my church, so.
Yeah, I'll give you something.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the report? Motion and second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Declaring vehicle as surplus.
Well, one other thing, Mr. Chairman, Roger, just to give you an update, we talked about public service work. The building's open again, so obviously we're seeing everybody. Before we were working under a directive that modified all supervision standards during COVID. We were only seeing the high-risk individuals, and we were getting out in the community, checking on a lot more because it was safer to get out in the community to do it. Now the building's back open. Individuals of all level of risk are coming in, reporting face-to-face on top of us being in the community. So that is all back to normal for the first time in about, 15 months, 16 months. So so I just wanted to report to the committee that's up and running and that's going to, working well now. So we're back to, and the only other thing is a real quick update on pretrial that I give every month. Yep. There's still no changes, no update. And the reason I bring that up every time is because we're sitting on 3 vacancies we can't fill, and soon a 4th vacancy. And 31 people in our office, in the Kankakee office, but we can't fill it with this uncertainty. Anybody the application pool's thin, as we know, we've talked about that, that's all over. But when we get a good candidate, I have to scare them away and tell them that in a couple weeks the state could rule this, we're gonna lose these positions and this job would be gone. Well, they say thank you, no thank you, and move on. But that's the problem, is we're sitting on these vacancies and vacancies until they decide. And then if they do let us keep pretrial, now we're back to hiring 3, 4, 5 people all at one time, and training's kind of starting over with our pretrial program that we have in place. So again, no update, but I'll gripe every month until we get something. So
okay, now moving on the vehicle. What?
Yeah, it's a 2007 Chevy Impala that doesn't even run. So
does not run. And you'll have all the information for the full board.
Yes, I just get
to Kelly and that. Yeah. Okay, I'll take a motion in a second. Mr. Eckhoff, second by Mr. Hunter. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Anything else?
No, just Veterans Court, 1 graduate tomorrow at 2:30 in courtroom 300. Anybody's, it's just 1 graduate though, so that's it.
October 22nd is their dinner auction too at KC.
You always beat me to that, Roger.
We got to get everybody know.
You're right. We'll get that out to to Kelly. So.
Okay, moving on. The sheriff. In your package, you have a copy of his monthly report. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Long, second by Mr. Kirkstra. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So just a couple things on the report. There is some positive news. The Illinois Department of Corrections has started taking more sentenced inmates. So our local numbers have gone down significantly, which is a good thing. Last year at this time, our average was about 268. As of fiscal year 2021, we're at 246, so 22 less, which is a good, like I said, is a good thing. Out of county numbers for that same period, last year at this time we were at average 281. We're down to about 252 right now. About an average of 30 less per day. So if you multiply that out by 90, you'd get your per month number of what revenue we are losing. So as I said, DOC has started taking more. I think we're down to about 10 sentenced inmates that are awaiting transfer. We are also putting together numbers from the Illinois Department of Corrections request for the number of days that we house their sentenced inmates, and we are working on some reimbursements, so there will be some money coming back to the county. Questions on that? Transports, our medical transports are up significantly. Our courthouse transports, with the courthouse back open, we are going to the courthouse virtually every day. Our federal detainees, both marshals and ICE, are utilizing video much more than they have in the past. So that is, saving us a little bit of transport money, as well as still giving these individuals their day in court, if you will. We recently had 3 individuals in the hospital at the same time. So when an inmate is in our custody and has to go to the hospital, we are required to sit on them over at the hospital. So when you talk about 3 inmates at the same time, unfortunately, depending on what's wrong with them, they can't, we have in the past gotten inmates in the same room if we've had multiple inmates, but because of some issues, they were not in the same room, so we had 3 inmates in 3 different rooms, so that was 6 staff per shift that were sitting on those inmates at the hospital. So it created a significant amount of overtime. 2 of those inmates are back. One of them was the victim of the shooting in Kankakee, where there was one was a homicide. The other one was who was the offender was also shot, so he was in the hospital as well. He just returned the other day. So it's what we have to do, and but just to keep you apprised as to if you happen to see any increase in overtime for the month, that's more than likely what it was.
Any other questions, comments on the report? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I was going to talk about the second part of that report. That's okay. It's just the sworn side. One of the things that we actually purchased about 1.5 years ago, right about the time that COVID started to hit, was something that is part of Tyler Technologies, which is New World, which is our software system. It's called Socrata. It's a county-wide system that every municipality has access to their own data. At this point, we just got trained on it about 2 weeks ago. They actually were able to send somebody up to train not only us, but other police agencies in the county. And basically, it is a system that allows us to look at where things are happening, when things are happening, and it's a benefit for all the police municipalities. And it's county-wide, but if you're Bourbon A, you can literally separate out the village of Bourbon A, and they can look at what's going on in the village of Bourbon A. We can look at what's going on just in the county. So it's very beneficial from an analyzation standpoint. And there is a public part of this that the public will actually have access to be able to see as well. However, until we get fully versed on it, we'll probably release it to the public, I guess, in the next couple weeks. But there is a public portion of that system that the public will have access to look at where things are happening. So a couple other things on the report, and I know this got brought up earlier, and I'll just mention it. And Mr. Lear, I appreciate the the part about the revenue. We have never looked at traffic stops as a revenue generator. And as Steve said, I've mentioned that a lot of times. And just as a idea, if you look at the report under citations this year, we've issued 1,434 citations. We've also issued 1,119 warnings. So every traffic stop is not amounting to a ticket. There is reason to give warnings, and our guys do a great job of doing that. So the idea again is public safety and keeping our roadways safe. I know last year we had 13 fatalities countywide. This year we're at 7. And as I've also said a number of times, 1 is too many. We will continue to enforce traffic and try to keep our roadways safe. Revenue, obviously with our out-of-county numbers down, our revenue's down, but we are making adjustments with expenses to offset that loss of revenue as well. So now I'm done with my report.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Jail inspection.
Yeah, jail inspection. So, we feel like the jail's getting inspected more than anything these days. But I did, did you include this to the board members?
Yes,
okay.
it's all inspected.
So you got the inspection report. The most important part of the report is at the bottom of the page. About the non-compliance with Illinois Department of Corrections standards. In both facilities, there were no non-compliances, which is certainly a credit to Chief Kalawenzu, Chief Schultz, Assistant Chief Schultz, and Assistant Chief Marlon Woods, who is in charge of our downtown facility, as well as the staff at both jails. They do a tremendous job, and between the inspections for ICE and the inspections for the Illinois Department of Corrections and the inspections for the U.S. Marshals, we are proud of the job that they do and the services that we provide. So the list of improvements, obviously you can look at those yourself, but it's significant, and fortunately for us, these inspections are pretty much like this every time. We are always looking to do best practices when it comes to corrections. So we are definitely out in front of a lot of things. So questions on that?
Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Line 8 on the inspection report mentions that gender preference information is now being included in the medical intake. Could you just explain to us how that affects how we're housing our inmates, knowing what their gender preference is? Is that including more than the 2 binary genders? That there's a big movement in society to try and tell people that they can be something other than what they are, and I'm just curious if that's what that entails.
Is more of a, so obviously when somebody comes in, they're either male or female.
Yes.
The gender preference issue becomes housing somebody that has or is in the process of transitioning.
So how do we go about
So we're just, the housing is the difficult part.
Yeah.
And so that's why we put that information on there, so that our staff is able to identify who's who and what's what. I mean,
so is there like a separate wing of the detention center?
There is not at this point. Okay. So we look at housing, and unfortunately the design of the jail, we're able to kind of separate people depending on the issues. There's all kinds of questions about what bathroom you use, and I get all that. We don't ask that, what bathroom are you going to use? You're either male or female, but again, if it comes down to the background of this person, who it is, and our numbers are very low. We were actually requested back probably 10 years ago, because it's more prevalent in other places. Cook County asked us actually to take all of their transgender inmates, which we respectfully declined. But yeah, so that's the reason that's on there, is just because we try to
I was just curious
accommodate as best we can to make
somebody not feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely, as we should. I was just curious how that's impacting your work.
It's really not.
Okay, good.
Mr. Snipes.
With the vast reduction that you're going to be taking the blunt of in that in the area of the housing, I guess the ICE inmates or whatever the state has garnered. And if a rule was to come out that you had to make that jail gender neutral, how would that affect the jail, and what would be a cost if they made it a non-mandated cost?
I don't know that I understand what you mean by gender neutral.
Well, gender neutral means that they would be able to, it's like when you're going into the hospitals or whatever, they say gender neutral, which means the male or female can use the same bathroom.
Well, I guess the easiest answer, Mr. Snipes, is that right now we have males and we have females, and we have males can't be housed with females, females can't be housed with males. So I guess I don't have an answer for you, because it's just, I don't believe that it's something that's going to happen. Jail standards obviously dictate for us how we house, so that's, you know, how that's going to be.
I'm just wondering if they did something down the line.
No, I don't. I mean, they do some goofy stuff, but I don't know, not quite sure that's going to be one of them.
Okay. Moving on.
Yep. Animal control update. We are full with both dogs and cats. And for those of you that are on the ARPA committee, I did request ARPA funds for the potential new building for that, just because we've got people tripping over each other. That's the human side of it, but we also need a little bit bigger facility for the number of animals that we have. So, I mean, that's an ongoing process. It's been that way for a number of years. Obviously, COVID changed that a little bit, because our numbers were way down during COVID, because people were home, people for whatever reason got dogs, cats, whatever, kept the kennel fairly empty. However, with everybody back out, whether those same people who got their dogs or cats decided now they don't want them because now they have to work, or they can't pay them the attention they need. So I would certainly suggest anyone in here looking for a dog or cat to contact Animal Control. We'd be more than happy to fit a pet to your liking. Couple things, and these are not on the agenda, but things that I want to keep you aware of. And with our local population down, and with the ability to move around some housing, we are in the process of designating, and I know this topic was brought up earlier, we are actually designating a housing unit for domestic violence abusers. We are going to keep them in the same housing unit. We are going to work with local social service agencies to come in and give them training. Mr. Rowe mentioned that they don't deal with the abusers or the abuser side of it, and nor should he, but we deal with that person while they're in custody. And while, like anything else, you know, anybody who is gonna you know, want to, whether it's drugs or whatever, if they don't want the treatment, they're, you know, not going to pay attention and they're not going to do it. However, they are in a controlled environment. They have to be there. There's no going anywhere. It's not like they have to show up for something and then not show up. So they're there. So we are going to provide some of that stuff. At this point, we don't see a cost for that, which is a good thing. But, you know, the cost right now is police, not only the injury to the victims, but the cost of police responding, the state prosecuting, the paperwork to the clerk, the public defenders defending. So anything we can do to potentially save some of that cost if one of these offenders who maybe is in this housing unit gets some training and for whatever reason never does it again, then it's a win. It's a win for our community. So, and we are able to do it because of our lower local population and the ability to move people around. We are actually going to do the same thing with an opioid housing unit as well. The number of people who are, you know, addicted to opioids, which causes them to be where they're at, we just feel like if we can reach those individuals while they're in custody, while they are an attentive group, we think it will still benefit the community in the long run. So we're gonna look at 2 different housing units, one for domestic violence, those charged with domestic violence, and separate the opioid users as well, the addicts. So, and we'll, again, at this point, I'm not asking for any money. We're gonna try to do this with the help of some social service agencies on both sides, domestic violence and opioid, but you know, we'll see how far we can take this. So just wanted to keep you advised of what we're doing out there. So with our low number of in custodies at this point. And lastly, the Illinois Sheriff's Association has, for the last year or two, encouraged our local or our legislators to participate in ride-alongs. And I can tell you that both of our legislators, Representative Jackie Haas just rode this past Monday, and Senator Joyce is riding this Friday. So both are participating in the ride-along to see what it is that we do on the street every day, and certainly a benefit. I know that after talking to Representative Haas, she was, I mean, she didn't change her mind on anything. She already knew what she knew, but she was very appreciative of the opportunity, and looking forward to having Senator Joyce Friday. So,
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Sheriff. Having been an alderman for some period of time, I spent time not only with police ride-alongs, but riding the snow trucks, snow, you know, as well too. It wouldn't be a bad idea if all the villages, or the trustees and the aldermen rode along with law enforcement and public works during snowstorms as well too. But that may be something you may want to share with your was it every Monday you guys meet? Mm-hmm. That's something you may want to talk about and share that with the respective entities, so they can encourage their trustees and aldermen to understand what you guys do, because some of the trustees and aldermen have no idea, and I underscore that, no idea what you guys do, and their only involvement with you guys is paying bills, and it's a lot more than just that.
And we appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I would certainly recommend or suggest anyone interested, with the exception of Mr. Fairfield or Mr. Long, who did it for their career. But you guys are welcome to, if you ever want to come back and hang out. But yeah, I would certainly entertain anybody who wants to ride along. We'd be more than happy to have you.
We get either one of them to come back and be a 2-car man.
That's right.
2-car shift.
That's right.
2-man shift. That's what I'm trying to say. Mr. Kirkstra.
Yes. Would that be the ride along? Would that be in the front seat, or would that be confined to the back seat? I've had plenty of those already.
Yeah.
I haven't had an opportunity yet to ride in the front seat.
Mr. Kirkstra, we would put you in the front seat.
Okay. Thank you very much.
This time.
They don't have the trunk anymore, so you're safe. Anything else for the sheriff? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Up next, the coroner, Mr. Cavender. In your package, you have a copy of the monthly report and the monthly receipts of money. Take a motion to approve. And Mr. Eckhoff, Mr. Lear. Comments on your report, Eric?
Morning, everybody. As I mentioned in
July, we anticipated a lot of movement in terms of finalizing cases, and that did occur over the past month, so a lot of our totals have changed. One concerning thing I did mention last month, I believe as well, was homicides have eclipsed where we were at in 2020 already. See, we're at 9 right now. 3 of our 6 pending cases are homicides, so we'll be at 12 for the year. So obviously that's very concerning. Positive trend in the month of July, autopsies went down. So that's helpful. Of the 125 deaths we had in the month of July, 1 was attributed to COVID. And we've had 1 in August as well. So that's pretty much it about the report there, unless there's any specific questions.
Questions on the report? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Declaring equipment as surplus. Take a motion to Mr. Hunter, second by Mr. Swanson. Just want to discuss that.
I believe you guys have everything in your packet. Well, the 4 items we're requesting be declared surplus. It's all part of the old X-ray equipment that in 40 minutes from now they'll be delivering our new X-ray equipment, so this will no longer be needed. Some of it is the table, for example, somebody may want, so we'll probably be able to sell that. In terms of some of the other equipment, it's mostly going to be used for parts. We're just going to see if maybe the company would like to buy it from us and they can use the spare parts for whatever they may need. So nothing useful for us anymore.
Any questions or comments on the surplus equipment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. What else?
Just a monthly update on overdoses. We are at 29 confirmed overdose deaths for the year, with 3 additional pending cases. 24 of our 29 overdose deaths involve fentanyl of some sort. And if you factor out where we're currently sitting right now, we're on target for 46 overdose deaths by the end of this year. We were at 49 in 2020, and we were at 29 deaths total in 2018 and 2019. So definitely on the rise again, unfortunately.
Mr. Hunter.
I got a question, Mr. Cavender. With respect to those fentanyl-related overdoses, how close do you work with Mr. Rowe with respect to prosecuting those individuals who have assisted in those selling of the fentanyl to the consumer, the person who overdosed?
Yeah, so we communicate pretty regularly with the state's attorney's office. They have a complex opioid prosecutor, I believe is what the title for that person is. S.A. Watson, I believe is who that is. And so obviously they receive all of our information. I know that they talk to the toxicologist at the lab as well to have a further breakdown of what's in the person's system. Our doctors go, when this case goes to court, they go and testify as an expert witness. So we are in regular communication with them in terms of this problem that's going on in our community. Makes sense.
Thank you.
Yep. Just a couple other things quickly. We talked last week at the ARPA meeting. For those who are involved with that, we did put in a request for about $130,000 worth of equipment. That includes the freezer that we mentioned here a few months ago. Our current freezer holds 2 people. The freezer that we anticipate going to will hold a minimum of 6, but potentially up to 9, depending on how we set it up. Also included in that proposal last week was for a new autopsy table, an autoclave, the X-ray equipment, which is coming shortly, supplies, allocation for our records management system, and some salary reimbursement. So again, all of that is pending the final approval of the Finance Committee later this month. But that's where we're at. I would encourage anybody to come out and take a look at what we have currently. I know we've been working with Jasmine a little bit on some PR things that are coming in the future. But I would encourage anybody to come out if you want to lay down in a new freezer or on our new table. Please feel free to come do that. The new one, yeah. Yeah. If you want to come see an autopsy, I know Colton, you've seen an autopsy before, and I think it would help give you a better perspective on what we do and why we do it, and how our office flows and works. So I would highly encourage that for anybody who has not done that. Finally, there was a little bit of discussion about the records that we've done. I think maybe what we'll do is for next month, put together a short program and bring in kind of what we had and what we went to now, where everything from 1960 to current is now digital. I spent a lot of time along with the coroner trying to find pricing on companies who could take our records and digitize them. And this company from Georgia did a phenomenal job. We sent them 28 bankers boxes full of records, and in about 2 or 3 months time, they took all those records and scanned them in. It's now on a cloud-based software that we have access to, and there's an annual subscription fee for that. It's included for the first 3 years of us, but we've also had a download link where we've been able to go and download all those cases into our current system. We have an Excel spreadsheet of all those cases, so we can index it, we can search it, everything like that. So I'll bring some pictures in next month to show you guys what it looked like before versus what it looks like now. And I'm telling you, the quality of the work this company did was phenomenal. It's actually easier to read the records now that they are scanned in on a computer than it was on that old nasty yellow paper that's been in the basement of this building or the treasurer's office or wherever they've been stored throughout the years. So we'll do that if the committee would like, and keep it short.
I think I just asked Kelly if you put it on a flash drive, you can put it up on the screen.
Absolutely, yeah, we can do that. So that's all I have, unless there's any other questions or
Mr. Snipes.
I just want to wait till you got through the all the other reports, but I just wanted to just ask a question. I know that they said there's a rise in the number of COVID cases, and this derivative of the Delta virus is permeating the county, et cetera, et cetera. Have we had any associated deaths from COVID or that derivative since its outbreak?
So again, in July, we had 125 deaths, and 1 death was attributed to COVID. And we've had 1 death in August thus far, 5 in June, and 8 in May, 13 in April, 1 in March, 6 in February, 17 in January, and 38 in December. So the trend is definitely down, but I mean, that could change. It's changed before, so.
Okay.
If you're interested in like daily updates, our website's updated daily with all that information in terms of number of deaths we've had, COVID deaths, overdoses, all that type of stuff. So it's a great resource to go on if you're interested, or constituents are interested in seeing what's going on. We do that daily.
Mr. Wheeler.
Are you still at 0 COVID deaths that did not have an accompanying comorbidity?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else for the coroner's office? Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll see you in September.
Any old business covered before the committee? Any old business? Any new business? Any new business? Mr. Kirkstra.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
Ms. Peters. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign.